Hello and welcome to the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week we are super excited to have Coach Figueroa from Niza High School. Coach has been at Niza since 2020, taking the Padres to multiple playoff appearances, including a region title in 2022. Also has extensive experience as an offensive coach at the junior college level at Mesa Community College, and we're very excited to have him on the show, talk some spread stuff, some RPO things, and some different things of that nature. So excited for that. And before we get going, just want to remind all our guests that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is sponsored by School Funder. School Funder is the only online fundraising company in America that lets you keep all that your money that your team raises, minus the small 3% processing fee. Sound too good to be true? I can tell you firsthand it's not. We used them last year for a fundraiser of our own and raised $12,000 in a few short weeks. And we were able to keep all of that money minus the small 3%. With other companies, we would have spent upwards of $2,000. You don't give away 20% of the victories your team accumulates. Why would you give away 20% of the proceeds that they make? All that money goes back to you and your team and whatever you need to better your program. So please get in contact with schoolfunder.org. That's schoolfundr.org. And also let them know the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you, as it will help the show. And while you're helping the show, we would certainly appreciate you to take just 2 seconds, completely free, does absolutely no money, nothing, totally free. All you gotta do is like and subscribe the videos. It helps us reach more coaches. We're slowly pecking away at that. And while you're on there, if you want to check out, I got the privilege to be on Coach Chip's show from out of Alabama this week. So check that out as well. But please like and subscribe, as it helps us reach more coaches. So we're going to get right into the topic at hand. And Coach, always start out with tell us a little bit about your football background and your football story, so to speak.
I would say I was an average athlete with exceptional coaches, guys that poured themselves into me, and I grew to love the game and everything that it brought to me as a person, within the white lines and outside of the white lines. I'm privileged to have been coached by some exceptional coaches and coach under some exceptional coaches. I'm a Marcos alumni. I played for Tom Joseph and Mike Molesky and Roy Lopez. So, coming back here and being able to coach my alma mater is a special thing that I don't take for granted, and I love being here. I love my guys. I love this culture. Um, I didn't know that I wanted to be a football coach, and so until I started working in education, and that itch kept itching, and I spoke to the coach where I was at, and I was teaching at Tempe Preparatory Academy, and Tommy Britton was the head coach there, and we had 10 really, really good years over there, lots of playoff appearances, a state championship appearance, and then, ventured off into the junior college world and was fortunate enough to coach under a great mind like Ryan Felker, and on the defensive side, Chanel Jones, along with other assistant coaches that were just outstanding coaches. I was there for 3 years, a couple bowl game appearances and a bowl game win. I was the tight ends coach and then the inside receivers coach. And after 3 years there, unfortunately, the Western States Football League kind of was dismantled. And so I took an opportunity to coach under Corbin Smith at McClintock. And that was a special time there. We had a really good year. We made the playoffs for the first time in 10 years. Got to coach my nephew. And when this opportunity became open, I shot my shot, and I'm fortunate enough to be here. And it's a privilege and an honor to be able to coach Marcos football.
Awesome. Was coming back to Marcos and leading that program something you always had in your mind, or was that just kind of something that fell into place and you jumped at it?
It was always on my mind, no matter what, whether I was coaching 2A ball, junior college ball, 5A ball, it was always, no matter where I was, it was always, what's the Marcos score, right? And as soon as the game was over, wherever the app, that I could find it, I was looking for the Marcos score. If I was at MCC at the time, I took advantage of it, and I was recruiting my home school, so I spent multiple, times here, recruiting Marcos. And so again, it was just something that was always in the back of my mind, and hoped that it would someday become an opportunity for me. And the door opened, and here I am. And again, going into my 6th year, we've done a lot of really good things while we've been here, and we're not done growing and trying to continue to produce great players, great people, and have great seasons.
The score checking is funny you mentioned that. I know the exact feeling. So I think we went up against each other. I was at Corona for a couple of years. I think it was 22 was when we no 23. Then we
Yeah.
matched up.
Yep.
But after every game too, I was checking PHS's scores and seeing how the Badgers did. So very cool.
Yes. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Coach, getting into our first football related question, do you think it's most important that you fit your scheme to your offensive personnel, or do you kind of coach what you know? How do you go about doing that?
I think that there's a possibility that you're able to do both, right? But for the most part, I don't try to fit a square peg into a round hole. I'm going to build off of the strengths of what I have in front of me on my roster, and kind of develop what I know around what my players are able to do, right? I often tell my kids, it doesn't matter what I know, it's what you're able to do on that field. So if I'm not teaching it correctly, if they're not able to execute it, it really doesn't matter what I know. So I want the guys to feel comfortable. I want those guys to be able to play fast. We've all heard the saying, KISS, right? Keep it simple. And that's essentially what I kind of game plan around, is just how can we make it simple for our guys? At one point when I was a student here, we were at the highest level, and we had a lot of student athletes, and things changed, a lot of other schools open, and so we don't exactly have guys that are just one way guys. So especially considering the fact that those guys are playing 3 ways often, right? They're, as soon as they get off the field, they're going right back on kickoff. They're going right back on, kickoff return, this, that, or whatever. And so they have a lot on their mind, as well as, being students, right? So there's that. And for us, we do have quite a few guys that have been playing football for a very long time, but for the most part, we have guys that just start off playing football like myself as a freshman. And I think the extent of their knowledge is, which teams are in the NFC East or the AFC West, and as far as concepts are concerned, and reading coverages and things like that, with the exception of probably some Madden knowledge, they're pretty green. And so I just want to be able to have those guys be able to play fast and feel comfortable and have fun.
I love that. Now you mentioned experience, at a bunch of different levels, and JUCO specifically. What led you to kind of figure out the right balance of challenging and engaging your kids versus keeping it simple and approachable, and kind of what was the path that led you to get to that point?
Especially with, you mentioned the junior college level. When I was at Tempe Prep, it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust. It was, we were going to run the ball, and it's up to you to stop us, right? And so we hung our hat on that. And once I got to MCC, and I was more or less a defensive guy to start. And I remember vividly sitting in the office with Ryan Felker, and he said, I want you to forget everything you know. I want you to be a sponge, and I want you to just coach, the guys up on the concepts and things like that. And when you have a, junior college lifestyle where you get kids in sometimes off the plane like a month before the season starts, they have to be, turnkey and go, plug and play kind of scenarios, right? And so we definitely explore different options, and we use bands to kind of help our guys, so that way they're not having to think very much. They're just athletes, and of course we want them to be prepared for the next level, because there's going to be some challenges for them, and we want them to be ready and understand how to read coverages, like I said, or defensively, offensively, understand what they're doing. But for the most part, just getting them out there on the field and letting them do what they do best. So seeing how that kind of transpired, and understanding again, like where I'm at and my kids, and how busy they are, and with everything that they got going on, as well as, like I said, being able to have to understand what they need to do on offense and defense, it just made more sense that way.
Coach, I loved listening to you talk about some of the coaches that you both have worked under and played under, some really, really high profile names. Tom Joseph, outstanding coach. I think that 2002 Mountain View team was one of the best teams in the history of the state. Also, Coach Felker, Roy Lopez, great football coach. What have you taken from all of those systems and kind of blended? And there's a lot of different schemes there. You got your spread stuff. Coach Lopez did all sorts of different things. Coach Joseph was a wing T guy. So you've really been exposed to a lot schematically. Have you blended that together into making your own system? Have you followed one or the other? How have you gone about putting all that stuff together?
I don't want to be, I don't know what the saying is quite, but it's like the master of none. I don't want to have to go on here and there, and then we really never really get good at one thing. I was part of that run offense, heavy offense, and early on. But I enjoy the RPOs and the different things that we can do off of RPOs and the spread concepts, and so I fell in love with that, right? And speed and space, and really just taking advantage of the grass and taking advantage of leverage and certain coverages and mismatches, and so. I do try to blend in, a lot of what I've done before, but I tend to focus more on the spread concepts. And I think this year, kind of looking at what we did, and I'd like to, add in certain things, more play actions and get under center a little bit more. And I got to that. I got to a lot of two back this year and the true fullback. We have one of those, old school, tape the knuckles, throwback kind of guys. And, I have fortunate enough to have a young man who's a fullback for us, and decided, we wanted to run some different things so that way we weren't as predictable.
When you're looking at, your experience and knowledge and all those different systems, how do you go about grouping them or even combining them? Is it personnel based or is it concept? Or do you keep them intentionally separate and try to teach a little bit of everything?
I would say it's more personnel based, right? When we get into our 12 or when we get into our 22 personnel, right? Where, but then I like to tell the guys, like, you have 4 or 5, presents, and they all have different wrapping paper, right? But it's the same present, right? And so I want things that we do all the time to look different, and vice versa, right? So there are going to be definitely some spread concepts that we do out of some run heavy looks that we have, right? Just to keep defenses honest. So, and it's coaching those guys up and letting them also, the guys are excited about being able to do stuff like that too. Right, a fullback being able to go out to the flats and catch a pass or this, that, or whatever, or get into a short motion and go out there and spread out the backer and then be able to run a route. They get excited about different things like that.
Coach, how do you go about establishing vertical alignment within your program from your lower levels up to your varsity? Do they get the whole playbook? Do they get a piece of it? How do you go about establish that? And how do you go about teaching your system to your assistant coaches?
I'm a teacher, that we all are, right? And so I understand, and I make sure that coaches, when they come in, they understand that there's going to be at least 5 different times that we reinstall our offense, right? We install it in the winter when we do winter sevens. We install it in the spring. We install it in June. We install it in July. We install it when we return back to school, right? And so we meet as a staff quite often, and we go over it as a group, so that way we're able to ask questions and truly understand what we're trying to accomplish, right? And so, I definitely get input from our lower level, because I understand that as someone who coached lower level, went to start, and freshman receivers, freshman DB coach, took great pride in developing those players so that way they were ready to go once they got to the varsity level. So I'm only as successful as my lower level team, and so I want to make sure that those guys are comfortable. So we give them the concepts, and we allow the coaches to kind of dictate, hey, we're just going to focus on, maybe just counter and power, right? Or we're just going to focus on a first level conflict defender, right? We're just going to, or it's all with the zone is just, we're not really going to go RPO with it. We're just going to give it, right? It just depends on what, again, they're able to do, what kind of kids they have, and you know uh, build it off of that. So if that makes sense, I just want the guys to feel comfortable at the end of the day, and we meet often so that way we can really focus in on how do we teach it, how do we make it simple for the guys, how can they play fast, how can they have fun, right? Because you want them to enjoy playing football, and you don't want them to be overloaded, because Felker said it quite often, it's paralysis by over analysis, right? And so you're not trying to cram 10 pounds of whatever into a 5-pound bag, right? And so just allow the kids to have fun and play fast.
You mentioned meeting and collaborating a lot with the lower level coaches specifically. In order to do that, you guys have to have a really strong foundation and trust. So how do you go about, filling out some of those positions on your staff, and then making sure that you get the right fit in that role?
I definitely take my time with it. You know, we often meet in person and just talk about, the person's background and, where they're coming from and what they take pride in as a coach, right? I want each one of my coaches to have an identity within their position group, right? And to foster whatever it is that they feel strongly about, as long as it's aligned with what we're about, right? And we're very family oriented, family focused football team, and I'm all about trust. Oftentimes I tell guys, like, I don't trust people unless we're able to sit down and break bread. And have those conversations and get to know somebody, because on the flip side, I tell my guys, when during the recruiting process, you talk about trust, is I'm like, don't settle for the text messages and the X DMs, right? I want you to be able to get on the phone, and if you can do it in person or virtually, I want you to talk with those guys. And so I use the same kind of approach, because we have to be able to trust each other. We have to be able to be out there, because with my guys especially, and because when the emotions get high, and we're in a game and everybody's feeling it, we have to be able to lean on one another and really trust where everyone is coming from. And so I'm really on my guys about making sure that they create that identity, and so any guy coming in understands what we focus on as a family. I let them know, this is our schedule. And as coaches, we tend to lose sight of that. The kids that we coach have things going on. And so, I know I'm dealing with grown men who have jobs and things going on and families to support. But for the most part, I'm like, hey, you got to make sure you're here. My guys are all about the trust as well. And so, we tell our kids, hey, you got to go to the dentist on a Saturday, or you can't be sick, or, whatever it is, you got to be at practice every single day. So they're not going to buy into you and follow through with what you want if you're not there every day. So I can teach someone what I want them to be able to know as far as X's and O's are concerned, but I can't teach you to love the school as well as much as I do. So that's huge for me. I bring them in and we meet as, man to man, and then we talk about, again, the foundations of where we come from, and then we will oftentimes, depending on what time of day it is, I'll take the guy into the weight room and let them see the boys working out and kind of get a vibe of the campus and get a vibe of our facilities, and really see, hey, do you picture yourself being here? Do you picture yourself being coached, working for me as a coach, right? Do we have the same kind of philosophies or very similar? And then of course, go home and talk to the other half, your better half, right? Because we're not going to be able to do what we want and love outside of our families if our families are not supporting us. So it's all of those combined, and truly just being here every day, be here and work hard, and really get to know the guys and be a mentor, and make crack jokes, and just be an outgoing guy with these guys. It's not that deep, you know. It's one of those things where I want my guys to be able to run through a wall for you. And so relationships are huge with me, as far as with my staff, and my staff to players.
Coach, this is a question that we've asked, and really the answers have been kind of all over the place. It's been interesting to hear because guys have done it successfully so many different ways. But when you're making an install schedule, we've heard guys that try to put their whole system in 3 to 5 days. We've heard guys up to 20 days. How do you go about your install schedule? You said you installed in the winter, then the spring, and then the summer, which is very similar to kind of what we're doing as well. And I'd be curious to hear how you go about doing that, how many days you would consider everything in, and then you refine it. How do you go about your install schedule?
It's usually about 2 weeks, 10 days or so, right? Sometimes if we need more, then we need more, right? It just depends on, how quickly the kids are grasping the concepts. But we tend to focus on at least 3 to 4 pass concepts a day. Like 2 quick game, 2 drop back, right? And then we'll have one run concept and then a screen concept. And so we focus on those, and we every single day we're going to work on formations offensively, and making sure that we're able to get to where we need to be. And then we usually progress that into a period where we have indie time, and so the boys are working on the route tree, and the quarterbacks are looking, just warming up, and the offensive line are going through their pass protections, and if it's a run game, the running backs are usually in with the linemen, and they're working on that flow with the quarterbacks, and the receivers are still working on their run blocking on the edges, and so we tend to divvy it up that way. And again, depending on how quickly the guys are grasping it, we may revisit a couple things, and we try to build off of those concepts into leading into others, our zone schemes and our gap schemes, and build off of those, and really just the base of all that, because as we get into everything else, then we can throw in the wrinkles, right? And that's where we kind of start off at.
How has your install process changed as you've grown and developed as a head coach over, you mentioned with Marcos, the last 6 years?
Yeah, it changes almost every year, because you guys will know as well as I know that you can't coach this year's team the way you coach last year's team, right? Every single year, every single year it changes, and so we tend to keep the install the same, but like I said, we kind of tinker with it just depending on how quickly the guys are grasping it, how much time we have, right? If there's a day off in school or this, that, or whatever, right? We kind of I don't want to be so strict into that. If, like I said, if we have to add another day or two, then we add another day or two. And it's to make sure that the guys just feel comfortable with what they're doing. So that's kind of how I've changed it, is based off of my kids that I have. Last year we had a lot of young guys playing really early. We had 11 out of 11 brand new starters on offense, and we had 9 out of 11 brand new starters on defense. So those guys had a lot to learn. And 7-on-7 helps, but I often tell my guys 7s are not 11s. So I tend to focus in on just us and the practice routine, because it's about getting those guys understanding the routines and the expectations and the standards, right? And so now, fortunately, we are heading into this season with 10 out of 11 coming back on offense and 10 out of 11 coming back on defense. So
That's quite a veteran group you got there, Coach. Let me ask you this. How many, you mentioned, because I've heard a lot of guys that are big in the RPO stuff had eliminated quick game, and some guys keep it in. How many concepts do you carry in each category? Run wise, drop back, quick game, RPOs? Are the quick game built into the RPOs, or how many concepts do you carry in each part of your offense?
I think around 7 quick games, 7 drop back, and then the RPOs are built in with that kind of stuff with the run game, right? And so it's one of those things where, depending on, again, the guys that I have, right? But there are going to be those staples that we use, right? Our slants, our outs, our hitches, right? Or our smash concepts, or the one that I'm covering today, like our drive concepts. So some of the ones that we found a lot of success with, but I tend to stick to at least 6 to 7 concepts. I feel like that is somewhere to start, and then after that is first, and then 6 to 7 run game concepts, including other gap scheme and RPO type stuff, but just building off of that, and seeing how well the kids adapt to that, and then if we're able to do more, then we're able to do more, and then we do that as the season goes on.
When you hit on the RPO, are you really investing and giving your quarterback a ton of ownership and making those reads, or are you more guiding that process and kind of more directing it, or is it totally dependent on the kid? Depending on the coach we've spoken to, we've heard a bunch of different philosophies and ways to approach that.
I'd honestly say it's a combination of all that, right? Depends on the kid, the experience of the kid, right? And how comfortable he feels back there, but he's only going to feel as comfortable as I help him get comfortable, if that makes sense, and so I guide that process. I'm often behind him and talking to him as we're going through some of the different individual drills, and we're working on our mesh. We work on mesh every single day. And so getting those guys comfortable with making the first level and the second level and the third level reads, right, depending on what we're doing, and giving them that time to have the autonomy, right? A lot of times I want the ownership to be there with my guys. And so oftentimes, if it's not there, I call it. And if it's not there and there's a different look, then change it. I trust you. And that's what it comes down to. And they're still kids, right? But if you watch enough film and you sit down with the guys and you're talking, just like when you bring in an OC, right? It's one of those things where I knew that with another OC I was fortunate enough to work with, Robert Ortiz, who's a great mind. I knew that 9 out of 10 play calls, we were going to be on the same page, right? And so giving that kid times, opportunities to call plays during team, and letting them know that, hey, this is what you have, but if we don't, this is what you can go to, and then seeing where we go from there. And I'm like, okay, yep, that's what I would have done. Cool, let's roll. And so that the kids they take that on, and so I think it's a combination of all of them.
Love that, Coach. Interesting stuff there. Walk me through a typical game week practice schedule.
Okay. So Mondays, we often, because of the guys having to go both ways, right? Well, Mondays and Tuesdays are usually like Mondays, like a half, 2/3 of the time, we're going to go offense or defense. And then the last of it, we'll go 90 minutes. We'll go 90 minutes of offense, and then the last 30 minutes of special teams, right? And then the next day, 90 minutes of defense, the last 30 minutes special teams. And then Wednesday's usually a mix of all three phases. And then a Thursday is basically a run through. We don't call it a walk through, a run through from the top down. I mean, I have the kids come out, we do the coin toss, explain the rules to them, right? And then they go back and they get hyped with the guys, and then we'll go kickoff, right? And then our kickoff return team is out there getting a kickoff return. Then we go offense, 6 plays and score. And then we go PAT, right? And then our kickoff team goes out, and then we kick off, and then our defense will go out, and then it's 3 plays, and then your punt return. And so they're getting every single phase of those, right? I don't want the first time to be out there to be their first time, and where I'm very situational based. Mondays tend to be, one of the ones where we're installing all the different things that we're doing. And then Wednesday for offenses would be more of the situational type stuff, right? You're coming out, you're going in, you're 2 minute, right? And so. And then any of the trick plays that we want to do, right? Our two, and like I said, our 2-point plays, and then Thursday again we run them through what to expect, right? And how are we on the sideline, right? And so that way we get guys like, hey, you're not a spectator. We're missing a guy, this kind of stuff. So that way we're not having that on a Friday night. Our special teams guys, hey, we get 11, punt, punt, and then they come out, we get the count, and then we go for it. And so that way we're just constantly give them as much exposure to those situations as possible.
Forgive me if I missed this part, but when you guys ramp that up on Wednesdays, and then is Thursdays more of a walkthrough for you guys?
Yeah,
Or
Thursdays. Yeah, we call it a run through. Just and that's where we go back to all the different situations, and we include all three phases, and it's more of there. It's more scripted. That's a more scripted kind of day. I go through scripts for my team, just to make sure that I'm having each of the different concepts involved, and so we're touching on every single one of those when we get to team. So that way, I'm never going to call anything on a Friday night that I didn't run throughout the week, right? And so we tend to do that way, and then Thursday again is one of those scripted and 6 plays score, or 5 plays and punt, or whatever it may be, right? And so I don't ever want to punt, but we got to be able to be out there and make sure our guys are accounted for, and everybody knows what they're doing. So.
I really enjoy this next question is one that I enjoy asking coaches because I think it kind of forces you to think about a lot of times. I think it's called the Pareto principle, where you get 80% of your results off of 20% of the things you do. So if you had to limit your offense to 5 concepts total, run and pass game, what would they be?
Well, I would say zone. I think you can just go straight up zone with it, or you can add the RPOs to it, right? So, and then, we can, if it's fair, I don't know, but I can add a little split zone to it, right? And get the tight end to leak out, right? So that's just one. And then I'm a counter guy, right? I enjoy whether it's uh, guard tight end or tackle guard. So I'd say counter. And then I would say I'm a jailbreak our tunnel screen, right? Letting those athletes be guys, right? Letting them be dudes and do something explosive. I would say quick game. That's a tough one. I'm a fan of our hitches. Hitches from one, rip go from two, and you can run them out of different formations and take advantage of most, defensive coverages with that. And then one of my favorite concepts would be our drive concept, because it's pretty much good versus any kind of coverage, and the guys enjoy that one, and the quarterback's easy read for the quarterbacks. So if I had to choose, though, break it down to like five, that's kind of where I would go with.
That was outstanding, Coach. Very succinct.
Well, I don't know if this was intentional, but thinking of it from a defensive perspective, it feels like everything you picked is the biggest pain in the rear for us on that side of the ball. Um, and I'm sure your defensive experience, especially you mentioned a JUCO, has helped with that. Um, but yeah, I just always find that for at least us defensively, I feel like sometimes OCs can get a little bit too in their head sometimes and try to get too fancy with it. Everything you mentioned just seems like the hardest things to cover. So I like the approach.
Yeah, I mean, and then in all honesty too, it's one of those things where I, can get into whatever kind of formation I need to within 3 to 4 words, right? So it's all going to look different. It may be 3 by 1, it may be 2 by 2. There might be some, where the tight end is in a rip yo, like a wing look. He could be out there. He could be attached. He could be in looking like a sniffer, right? And so it'll look different, but it'll be the same concepts. So. I've been guilty of that myself, of again overthinking things and trying to be too cute, and just kind of football's football, and just getting my guys in the open space, because high school boys, they're gonna miss some open field tackles, right? There's gonna be it comes down to the Jimmies and Joes, not so much the X's and O's, right? And so I think for the most part, those concepts have been ones that I've seen as successful concepts at the high school level and at the junior college level, and I often see them, on Sundays as well, right?
Coach, what you just said kind of gave me a thought there. This is something that I really try hard to be good at, try to get the call in 5 to 6 words. Sometimes I go over that. How many words would you say is a typical call without giving anything away call wise? That's a fascinating subject, because there's guys that don't tell the back where to align. I've always had that in our system, so it adds a word. But how do you go about doing that? And what do you consider too many, where you might just give it a one word call? Those type of things, because that's an interesting question that I don't think we've explored on the show enough.
Yeah, I try to get away from the sentences, right? You often see those clips of John Gruden, right? And the quarterback gets 15 to 20 words, and they're not able to go back to the huddle. I mean, that's you can't put a guy through that, but obviously they have more time to be able to go through things. I try to keep it to no more than 5 words. We don't tell the back where to align. We kind of discuss that over the course of the week or series by series. It's one of those things where, again, defensively, after looking at, kind of how they align, right? And we can look at it and say, okay, they're aligning to the back. And so we'll put them in pistol for the most part, right? Or whatever have you. And so that could be series by series, or going into that game, letting them know that, hey, we're going to have you start here. And if we need to move you, we'll move you. Um, but it's either, a couple, 2 to 3 formations, and then the actual call. So, and then sometimes a lot of times it's just a rabbit call is what we call it, or NASCAR, right? If we get an explosive play, and then I'll just give them one word, and they know exactly. I give them the formation and then the word. Usually it's not a formation. I just give them the word depending on what we're doing at that point. And so they know that, and we try to match, right? Like the drive concept today, right? There's a shallow route. So we'll often say, Tampa, right? And that they know shallow water. That is the association, right? When we go through certain run games, right? If it's rap or whatever have you, it would be Lil Wayne or Drake or whatever, right? It's one of those. So we tell them just the concepts, and we have a word that kind of they can associate with that, which helps us to play a lot faster. And then oftentimes, like what we normally do is I'll give them the formation and then the band number, right? So I can say Jimmy Joe right, and then white 10. And so then they know to look at the band, and oftentimes it tells them exactly what they do. right? If it, and then if it's a mirrored concept, it'll tell them, hitch rules, right? And so they know like these are my rules when we're running hitches. If I'm in a 3x1, if I'm in a 2x2, wherever I'm at, these are the rules that I follow. And so oftentimes it'll say out rules, slant rules, hitch rules, and again, it's process, repetition. And we, like our practice plans, we often, we'll go 3:30 to 6, and pre-practice is when the coaches get their indie time. Because coaches they want as much indie time as they can, right? And so and I was obviously an indie coach at one point, so I understand that. But for the most part, like when we get into the actual practice plan, whatever we're doing that day, that's what is expected that you are doing within your individual time, right? So if our slants are going in that day, then you're working on slants, you're working on lookies, and if we're working on hitches, I should see the receivers working on catching a hitch and catching a rip go and working the tunnel screen and working their inside end heavy or outside end heavy, working the block for the corner. So that way, when we get to routes on air, they know exactly what routes we're doing, right? I'm not teaching anything when we go into routes on air other than, hey, make sure you get outside the back, or hey, make sure you restack, or hey, they play a lot of cover 4 or cover 2, so we're going to bend on the seams or whatever have you. But it's routes on air. We're going. And then when we get into our team session, we're coaching on the run, right? And so if we get to that point and I call a jailbreak or whatever have you, and the kids don't know what they're doing, I'm looking over at the wide receiver coach saying, what did you do during your indie time? That is not the time to do, cone drills or this or that, right? That was at 3:30, right? When we get into the indie time that you have, I want you to make sure you're covering, because you're having at least 2 indie sessions. You're having a pass indie session and a run indie session, right? And then we tend to often do screens together. So then we're everybody's on the same page. So hopefully that makes sense.
'Cause I really like how flexible like you are with your philosophies, and also with that, just how pragmatic it is. Just because if it works, it works. Like you said, put the kids first and not you. So with the indies, is it like the pre is more just like your kind of your EDDs, or your more just foundational stuff, and then once you get into practice time, those are more conceptual indies, where you're working more simulation type deals.
Absolutely. Yep. That's where, the running backs are getting their step over bags out, right? Their agile bags, and they're working on their ball security and driving their knees, and they're going through all those different kinds of things. The receivers are going through their releases, right? Every day we're going through releases. And so they're working on their releases, and a lot of it's the guys, they're going out there on their own. So that's the expectation, right? We definitely have coaches that are out there. But a lot of times the boys are self-starters. They go and get the sled bags, right? And then they get them right and they know what to do. Or the linemen are getting their ladders and they're working on just getting their feet warmed up, right? And they're going through all their, through their pro communication, right? And then we often will have special teams indies going on at that time as well, right? And so guys, and it's really simple stuff, like shock shed and release, right? Working on all those kinds of things. And then and so the guys are catching footballs. They're it's kind of loose, right? But an objective, and a goal that we're trying to accomplish during that time. And then we start promptly at 4 o'clock, and we're ready to go. So I think that's been something that we've kind of learned to do over time, right? And adjusted over time, and it's worked for us.
Love hearing that stuff, Coach. I'm always interested in that. Been looking forward to you sharing your screen and coaching us up on some concepts. So take it away, Coach, and we will listen and learn and ask questions as we have a need.
Gotcha. Getting here. Okay, so I'll focus on one concept, and it's one of my favorite ones. It's our drive concept, our shallow concept that we call, and you can see here that this is what the boys will see, right? I have it in huddle as well, um, and so they're able to look at that. We tell the boys, hey, huddle's free, right? So it's free for them. So we make sure that they're looking at the installs. We track that. We know the percentage of the boys that have looked at the installs, and so we definitely hold them accountable to look at those, and we cover those during our football period that we have. And so here this concept is, why shallow, and you see the little rabbit icon, and so the rabbit name for that is gator, right? So they hear gator, no matter what formation that they know, the Y is always running the shallow, the H is always running the dig, right? Or the hunt, because they're hunting for grass. The Z always has the post, and the X has the more, and the tailback, whether it's a free or it's a check, he has the shoot or the arrow, right? And so a lot of the ideas and the principles, I got some notes here. Spread offense staple for us. It's a high percentage, easy read, and easy throws for the quarterback. It's simple to install. It's obviously a great high school concept. Good versus any coverage. It combines the quick game with the drop back, right? And that's kind of, I want to be able to have those deep routes, but then also I want to have that little quick little out if we need it to. So it's a combination of the two, right? There are no dummy routes. So it's a nice natural setup for our hot communications, right? If we see that somebody's going to be coming off the edge, we yell ha 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 ha, and then that they may alter the route itself. Um, it's great with targeting rules, because that hunt route, right, is often open, and so we're not afraid to throw over the middle. Um, it creates mismatches with the slots and the linebackers. Um, it's an easy way to feed your dudes, right? It's Jimmy's and Joe's, right? And so the team knows it's, the team will often know it's coming if you watch enough film, but you don't necessarily know where it's coming from, if that makes sense, right? And so with that, let me see here. We go through it. The quarterback verbalize a picture of where the ball is going to go. So oftentimes we tell the quarterback to start his eyes away from the shallow, right? Because then we understand, because the H on that side is trying to go toward the outside shoulder of that linebacker. We told guys that a lot of times certain routes are going to protect other routes, right? So to the X side, the X is going to run a go more. Even if he gets driven out to the sideline, he's going to be given, he's going to have a go more, so that way that corner has his eyes on him and it's not taken to the shallow. Same thing with the hunt, right? He's going to be going toward the outside shoulder of the nearest outside defender, right? And then being able to get to his 10 and then get across the middle. But we're trying to accomplish and get the eyes of that linebacker to the H, which then so that way we're not creating a kill shot on the Y, right? And so oftentimes the quarterback, on the third step, it'll be to the 8, to the shallow. And then if that's not there, then it's a hitch to the dig. If that's not there, it's a second hitch to the shoot, right? And I've manipulated that arrow to where it's a wheel sometimes, right? It's the mismatches on a linebacker. The pre-snap read, it's going to be those two outside routes, right, versus zero coverage. Or, hey, guess what? My guy is better than their guy, right? And it's just taking a shot. So those are things that we talk about, and I can get into those. And I can run this out of, and I've run it out of a dozen different formations, right? So let me see here. I can go through some of the different looks that we've run it out of, right? So this is our base 2x2 look that we have, and then we'll have where I think that's pretty much the same on there. Let's see here. So here is early H move. So early, we'll tell my H that he's on the right side. And oftentimes he's the number 2 receiver, and I'll get him into a move look and then run it from there, right? Or if I go flip and it moves the Z and I go Z move, then I motion him across and then he just sets up. But then that also changes, again, it makes it look different, but it's the same concept, right? Here you have, we go H shallow here. So now we know that, and again, I talked to the boys about this. All right, well, if the hunt's going towards you and you're the outside receiver, right, what route do you have? And like, okay, it's a post, because obviously you want a high low. We want to manipulate that safety, right? And then obviously the high low, the backer too, is he going to drop and pick up this H that's coming, or is he, or the Y, or is he going to come down to the shallow, right? Having that guy pick, right? And so then they obviously know H shallow, the Y knows he's the one running the hunt. And then our tailback knows that he's always running his arrow or the shoot away from the shallow. So we discuss that quite often. Here's where I move the tight end. and have it in a left look. And so this is left H shallow. Just again, another look to kind of manipulate the defense and make it look like it's something different, but it's really not. Here it's a Hurley hit wing. So now I have the H in a wing look, and it's H shallow. And so we run it out of that. I tend to, this year I was trying to stack more of our 2x2s and really try to pick off certain guys. With our shallow coming from the outside, you can see a similar look here where it's like a gator switch. You have the H here on an early hit, right? So the early tells the H, that he's the number 2, but the hit tells him that he's the H and the I inside, right? So the HI in the hit is H inside. That's how he knows that he's the number 3 receiver, right? And again, we go formations every single day, and the guys are in rows, and they're in their 4 deep or whatever, however deep we are at that position, and it's early, and they all move together. Hit, and we'll go early, and then we'll go base. So they got to get back to ace or get back to base, and then we'll go left, and then they know that, and then all the tight ends move. The H's adjust their split. And then we'll say over, and then they're all talking to each other because, I take it from watching a lot of softball games with my nieces growing up, and those softball girls are always talking, right? So I always want my guys talking, and defensively too, right? And so making sure that, because it gets loud, and you got to be able to communicate with one another.
Coach, how are you communicating your protection to your offensive line?
So I've taken, and how to identify it, at least I've taken from Jason Mons, in his approach to kind of, no matter what the front is, we're going to classify it into 4. It's either going to be an even split, an even stack, an odd split, or an odd stack look, right? And so it doesn't matter where it's a 5-2, a 3-4, it's still an odd split look, right? And so based off of that, and then obviously looking at who their dudes are, right? And knowing where we have to set it, whether, if it's a full slide look, if it's a half slide look, we tend to, focus more on our half slide looks. And then, our running back is the one calling, hey, Louie, Ringo, whatever it may be. Or that he is calling, free, which tells him, hey, I'm gone. It's on you guys at this point, right? And then obviously the quarterback is going to be responsible for a guy. And so we know that, hey, if the running back is yelling free, that quarterback knows, okay, now I'm responsible from this guy to this guy here, right? And the guys, again, are always talking. I got smart football players, that on the line, and especially this year going in with the senior at center, I put a lot on his plate, but it's stuff that we go over and over, and he feels comfortable doing it. And but I think that we'll set it to the guy, to the dude that they, and depending on who they have out there, and that's usually what's worked for us. Obviously it's never perfect, but it's kind of one of those things where I give them the autonomy sometimes to kind of make sure it fits versus, hey, if we see this is what we're going to go to. If we see this is what we're going to go to.
That's impressive. Senior center's got to be a really smart young man to be able to execute all of those type of things. Coach, one other quick question. There's been times I've seen it where the hunt route is where it's going, there's a post to that side, and a couple other times it was a vertical. I totally understand where we're talking about with the shallow, but how do those outside receivers know their routes based on the call?
And based on the call, oftentimes I'd say 90% of the time you're going to have the post route opposite of the hunt route, right? Because again, that safety, we want him to either he's going to be with that post, or if he sees that hunt, he gets overzealous and he wants to drive down on that hunt route, that post route will be open there, right? And then so the go route is to usually clear everything out on that side for the shallow that's coming to that direction, right? And so, and then if that outside backer away from the shallow, let's just see here. If we're talking to the Y side here, we know that he's going to be manipulated by either he's going to follow this H route, the dig route, or he's going to drive down on this shoot route, right? Because it's shallow, hunt, shoot. So it's 1, 2 to 3. And so if this outside backer drives to this shoot route, we know that, again, speed and space, that this guy is more or less going to be open if we have enough time to be able to throw to that route. So I have a few clips of a couple times that I've run it. Hopefully I'm able to do this here seamlessly. Let's see. I'll share again.
I love the versatility of the concept, Coach. A lot of different ways to get to the same thing.
Yeah, because again, just that's pretty much where it comes down to. You're able to limit the amount of concepts you have because you have different looks out of it, right? And so here's just a couple plays that I remember I called shallow quite often in this game here. And here, as you see, you have a tight end wing look, right? And so that's based off, they've seen through film that, hey, we've run a lot of power out of this look, or we've run a lot of counter out of this look, or we've run a lot of split zone out of this look, right? Obviously, down and distance will tell you that I'm probably not going to run it, but again, we're dealing with high school kids out here. When they see the same look, they're probably not thinking of down and distance in that moment for the most part, right? And so, and a big stressor for us here, especially on this route, you'll see here on the H, he's taking that backer with him. He's rubbing off the outside shoulder to eventually free up the space here, the grass here for the quarterback, right? We have this guy running on a go route. We have this guy taking this corner or the safety as well, the twofer on this post route. We have the shallow runner. So the shallow runner, I'm really strict on that. I want him to run a 2-yard shallow, right? I want him aiming at the heels of the defensive lineman. So here he gets a little deeper than I would like. But I want him to run at the heels of the defensive lineman. And once he catches the ball, we call it riding the wave. I don't want them putting their foot in the ground and heading up. I want them to ride the wave. And I go, just trust me, guys, because once it happens in the game or it happens in practice, you'll see why I want you to do that. Then obviously over here, we have the tailback on a free. He's running this arrow. He's taking this backer over here. Hit the shallow, and then he just rides the wave. So here's another look, same look. Easy catch. And you can see here too that the H is open as well, right? And he's
Absolutely.
deeper than what I would like him to be. And if we really wanted to get over the top for the post, we could take a shot if we really wanted to.
Well, and kudos to your line there for picking up the blitz and then giving a great pocket too.
Yes.
Much so.
Shoot, we're only as good as our boys are able to protect, right? So the boys put in a lot of time. They take a lot of ownership. They understand that it starts up front with those guys. They're boys, man. So they want to protect their friend, right? And it's not just, they understand that I have a role, right? My role is to protect my friend behind me. So that way he has the time to do what he needs to do. It's all 11 guys working as one to get to that same objective. And the guys are selfless, right? And just like other routes are there to protect other routes, right? To make sure that I'm not getting my homie killed out there, with a kill shot type of thing, right? So those guys understand that. And like I said, we are very situational, and oftentimes we get into the offensive linemen have the most inning time. They have the most indie time to make sure we're looking at it from we have blitz cards that are created, right? So I'll have a coach go through every single game of the opposing team and draw up the blitz cards versus different formations. So, hey, and that's how I kind of evaluate going into the game as well. Like I'll watch the game and it's hard obviously because it's huddle. You're not getting the true pace of it, but I just watch the game to just watch the game, offense and defense. I kind of see how certain players respond, right? Who's the liability on the other team, right? As far as offense and defense, right? Character-wise, right? Who just does their own thing, right? So you kind of tend to see some of things like that, or who's the guy that struggles the most on the offensive line, right? And the defensive line, and then obviously you pull up the roster and look at, who's a returner and who's not. And then I look at, how do they set up versus certain formations? What are the looks that they give us, right? And sometimes that'll tell me that, hey, I'm going to live in 3-by-1 here. Run or pass, I'm going to live in 3-by-1, right? Or I'm going to be in 2-by-2, or I'm going to manipulate it this way. I'm going to get into this formation so that way I get this coverage, right? Because I've seen in film that when we get into this rip yo wing look where I have the tight end and a little wing to the tight end, right? We're going to get cover three. So they're going to think, oh, it's going to be run heavy, but we're just going to run, hitch from the wing, rip go from the tight end, and the seams are alive because they're in cover three, right? And so we often do a lot of things like that. But going back to the original point, the linemen are looking at, hey, we got blitz cards here, so they're getting it every single day, and we lift every single morning. So we have turf in our weight room. Fortunate enough to have turf in our weight room, that we'll often sneak some reps in that way, where it's just a little dry run, right? And guys are being able to work their combos or whatever have you.
Love it, Coach. Always think it's really cool when somebody gets a chance to take over at their alma mater, and you've clearly already done an excellent job. And in the newly configured region, I would certainly look for the Padres to be a favorite with 20 starters back. That's something you don't usually see at the high school level. So want to thank you for your time. We really, really appreciate it. And tell all our viewers here on YouTube, please be on the lookout for next week, as we'll have a new episode on of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show. But thanks so much, Coach. We really appreciate it. And till next time, we'll see you later.